Welcome back to Direct Station, where politics are in retrograde. I am Kate Carey. If you've been wondering why this year feels like we're living through the breakdown of everything simultaneously, why tech billionaires have more power than those in governmental office, why we're watching the daily unfolding of a catastrophic man-made famine, why authoritarianism is not only on the rise in every hotspot in global news, but actually is moving at a dramatic and shocking pace across multiple countries at the same time. If you're wondering why the planet is melting, why we argue about pronouns, if you're wondering why the sexual crimes of powerful men are suddenly exploding into public consciousness, if you're wondering why is an American president asserting that nuclear weapons are being moved closer to enemy territory for the first time since the Cold War, y'all, there is an explanation for all this. Let's talk about it. If this is your first time joining, hi, thanks for coming. I'm glad you decided to give the podcast a try. Here's how it'll work. You will tolerate a little more astrology than you might in your day-to-day, and I will provide a new way to look at what we're living through. For today's astrology, I'm going to tell you about 5 planets and one important concept in order to paint a picture about what astrologers mean when we say this moment is unprecedented. My job is to make it accessible, make you feel like it might matter a little, provide a little hope and a little literary and historical context for what we are experiencing. The sequence will go like this. 1, we'll do the news. I'll pull out some details you might not be tracking, and I will assume that you are aware of the general OMG of the moment. I will explain the planets, how they're situated, why it's weird, and how long it'll last. I'll look at the historical patterns that help us understand this first time ever arrangement by looking at the component parts of that arrangement. We will make a little meaning from it all, and then we'll lean on some literary wisdom from seers and sayers who've come before us in order to come up with something we can do with it all. The news is intense, as usual, in Trump's America, but I promise you there is a genuine hope in the sky. As I thought about today's episode, I was torn by the intensity of so many huge and upsetting and overwhelming events that have so many of us feeling paralyzed, out of control, or flooded. I've been waking up lately noticing I feel afraid of this government. I feel afraid for our country. I feel afraid for myself and my family in this country, which as a white woman with reasonable means, I do not often experience, right? So things are changing. It is okay to notice that. It is okay to feel overwhelmed by that. It is okay to notice that we have officially finally arrived in an authoritarian America. But even as we've gotten to see the beginning of the undoing of the stranglehold of the patriarchy as this Epstein thing has begun to weaken this presidency, there are simultaneously darker forces convening and planning behind this presidency. And if we are to be prepared for that possibility, we do need to understand the scope of what's going on and how the sky can explain what's going on, why it's so intense. And then also use that information to begin to organize and inform a response. I mean, the amazing thing about the planets is that they will organize and inform our response, whether we attend to them or not. Like the rain will impact what you end up doing that day, even if you don't really think about it, even if you don't really know it's going to rain, right? But knowing it's going to rain affects how you plan and think and coordinate your movements to maybe even take advantage of the weather by doing activities more suited to the rain outside or cozy days inside. I'm sure you also notice that nobody you know is really okay right now, and everything feels like it's falling apart, right? But here's what's really got my attention this week is the synchronicity of it all. If we look at what's just happened in the last 7 days, we will see a pattern of similar and constant themes sprouting up across the planet in different locations. That's because the planet is a single body that is being affected by other bodies in the sky. So Trump ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be repositioned closer to Russia after a social media spat with the former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, the first nuclear posturing to occur since the Cold War. At the same time, Trump ordered Republicans in Texas to take the most extraordinary and unprecedented move towards legal redistricting of voting districts that would excise the power of any traditional voting bloc. He fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, accusing her without evidence of rigging jobs data and using a series of bold lies and a reimagining of history to do so. A classic authoritarian move to control information. Speaking of that classic authoritarian posture, Netanyahu is doing the same thing in Israel, saying absurdly that there is no famine being caused by his military in Gaza, and that we should disbelieve our lying eyes. Meanwhile, Russia is taking early but unambiguous moves to begin a process that would shut down citizens' access to encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp. China is requiring elementary school teachers and nurses to surrender their passports to enforce, quote, discipline. All this is happening within days of each other. The intense upheaval isn't a coincidence, my friends. This is what happens when transpersonal planetary forces, that's a new vocab word we're going to learn today, transpersonal, activates leaders simultaneously across the globe. All of these authoritarian leaning leaders are hearing that call and responding to it from a shadow perspective in a shadowy way to escalate their own power and control over their people. Okay, so let's better understand why they're doing that. And let's better understand what the invitation is for the rest of us, what the possibilities are, therefore. So today we're going to talk about a configuration some astrologers are calling the Great Pyramid. The rarest and the most powerful, that's not a vocabulary word, that's just sort of like a metaphorical way of thinking about it, like this giant object in the sky that is moving between these 3 points. It is the rarest and most powerful planetary configuration in human history, and it's been building since, you may recall, 2020. It peaks in February of 2026, and it begins to dissipate in 2028. And I want to give you both an explanation for why the world feels nuts right now and a long view perspective on how we might navigate this transformation and even leverage it so that when this is over, we might be living in the world we wish to live in. So today's a bit of a wide view that is meant to examine the sense of overwhelm that we're all experiencing and seek to make it make slightly more sense. Okay, so the players in our Great Triangle are what astrologers call transpersonal planets. So as an English teacher, I am required to inform you that trans means across, beyond, or through, right? So in this sense, when we're talking about transpersonal planets, we are talking about cosmic forces that operate beyond personal ego and individual concerns. Yes, they affect us as individuals, for sure they do, but they are slow moving and have a huge impact on how we experience the world and each other. About half of the planets are much closer to us. They move faster. They affect us day to day. We have different days, different weeks, different hours, depending on what's happening. But these transpersonal planets are sort of this collective experience that all of us are having, and it moves in slow motion. They reflect generational and spiritual forces that transform us, transform the society, and not just the personal, right? So their slow movement means that they influence us over years or even decades, which is why this feels so deep and so relentless. If you can imagine, they have all changed neighborhoods in a single year while they're on the move. Typically in a year, you've got 1 or 2 planets in the whole system changing signs. This time you've got literally, y'all, literally all of the transpersonal planets that affect all of us moving neighborhoods, moving skylands in the same year, sort of one after the other. So even if they weren't in a powerful aspect with each other, we would still be having a hell of a year because of these moving neighborhoods, planets. When they change skylands, it's such a big deal. If you're not in the mood to learn about these planets, just take in the archetypal signatures and the scope of the thing, and it'll begin to make sense. My metaphor for understanding the cosmic moment is located in my tidy little kitchen, which is one of my happy places. What can I tell you? I have 6 planets in Virgo. Okay, so come on into my kitchen. We can look at 5 variables that we understand and I've seen before, but never, guys, never all at the same time, right? So there are different things going on in this metaphor, but we don't know what happens if you do them all at the same time. We know what happens one at a time, or even two, or even three at a time, but you definitely don't know what happens when all 5 of them are occurring at the same time and they are in the kind of angular configuration in which we find ourselves now. So in the first corner of that triangle, right? A triangle has 3 points. You remember this from high school geometry. In that first corner, we've got Pluto. Pluto, if you will, in this scenario, is like the sourdough starter. It's alive, it bubbles, it transforms flour and water, and something that can create endless abundance. And if you feed it right and share it generously, it works for you, even for your family, even for your community. But if you neglect or contaminate it, it can sour the whole kitchen with its fumes, and it can even become toxic to eat. But more or less, I can trust that if I attend to it, miracles will occur in a fairly predictable way. The first few times you really leverage sourdough started to like perform bread, it does take about 12 hours to do. You're like, oh my God, I am God. Like I have created. I can cause life. I can nourish the people, right? That is Pluto in the skyland of Aquarius, the planet of death, of rebirth, of power, of transformation in the skyland of the people, of innovation. So deep shit, transforming trauma, evolving into a new way of being for the collective, leveraging technology in a transformative way. So, you know, that's Pluto, the farthest planet. It's over in the corner of the kitchen, right? We learned about him growing up. So use that to remember. He's from the depths of space. It represents the depths of humanity and everything that means. What do we keep deep down inside, right? So just notice for a moment that all the Plutonian themes of this time, they're very visible. How trauma is so much a part of what's happening and so much a part of the reckoning that we're experiencing. Notice the role even of horror, the role of redemption, the role of power over, all embedded and happening to the collective in this moment. And we are in the early stages of the experience. Pluto just changed skylands last year. Second and third variables we find in a Saturn-Neptune combo. These two don't often hang out together. They are together now in my kitchen in a pot of hot oil. So you got the pot full of oil and it is on the hot stove. The hot stove is the skyland of Aries that both of these guys have moved into. Aries is hot. Aries is active. Aries is aggressive, right? Potentially quite dangerous and destructive to the entire operation with this big pot of hot oil on it, right? But it can deliver the dream of glorious fried food, right? It can make a bag of frozen potato bits into an actual dinner. I mean, you know, toddlers would call it a dinner, right? It can be a seductive way of life. It can invite the cook into an illusion of nourishment, even if there is too much fat or calories in a dish. But it can also burn the cook if we're not extremely careful. You get the temperature wrong, and you'll either get nothing out of it or you'll burn the house down. You get a soggy, warm mass, or you can burn down the house, right? And you've heard me talk about them a fair amount. Mr. Dreams in a 165-year orbit around the Earth, right? And Mr. Sirius, the quickest moving fella in the entire configuration in a 29-year orbit. And they are together in Aries, the land of action, aggression, conflict. When transpersonal Neptune's dreams meet transpersonal Saturn's reality in the warrior sign of Aries, something is going to fry. Structure meeting disillusion at high heat. When reality crashes into delusion through direct action, get the temperature and the timing right, and you can create transformation. Get it wrong, and everything burns. Have too much of it, and your body is not so happy. Saturn is about the laws of physics, of time, of consequences. And Neptune is the dream. And these two are hanging out together for the first time since 1989. And it's a lot. I don't often cook with a vat of oil for this very reason, even though the idea of fried food is so wonderful. The dream of the fried meal, a fish and chips or something like that, is so wonderful, right? But nobody has time or health bandwidth for a lot of it, right? Okay, fourth element in this imaginary kitchen is Uranus. Uranus is the food processor. This is a fairly new, fairly radical device. Its arrival in the kitchens of the industrialized world, along with other objects like it, was innovative. It's very different, very quickly adopted, very quickly changed the time and the method of cooking. It blends. It moves at revolutionary speeds. It changes how we prepare everything. That's Uranus in the skyland of Gemini, the planet of revolution, of awakening, of breakthrough, of sudden change, of chaos. And he's in the skyland of Gemini, which is ideas, decisions, logic, expression, the conscious mind. So giant, impactful changes in language are happening all around us, right? Breakthroughs and ideas and how we think about revolution and consciousness overall. We push that little button on the processor and zoop, everything changes. Everyday stuff becomes quite altered. Each day lately, our thinking, our words, our understanding is evolving, right? That is a universal experience that we are all having right now. We are all collectively leveling up, whether we choose to or not. The information revolution that transforms how we process ideas at incredible speed is upon us. Like, people are listening to podcasts at like 1.25 or 2.0 speeds. I do not participate in that. My brain, I feel like, could not take that much stimulus. But we have but for those of us who don't participate at that level, we have a thought, and it is blasted across the world if we spit it into our phones, right? Or a toxic idea in the marketplace of ideas in some other country is suddenly mixed into the thinking of people across the planet, right? Information is changing. It is being spun up and radically altered. Transpersonal Uranus is rapidly chopping up old ways of thinking and communicating, and is either creating something brilliant, or, if the shadow were to win, might be pulverizing what we were meant to preserve. But wait, there's a fifth element that I did not expect to be using. Sitting with Uranus and his changey impact is the asteroid Sedna, right there in the skyland of Gemini. Betrayed and ignored feminine wisdom, rising to power, is traveling with Mr. Change for the duration of this configuration. So Mr. Change is hanging with the asteroid that causes change through the reformation of feminine pain into power. When I use the word feminine, by the way, I want to remind you, I'm not talking about ladies only. I am talking about the feminine in each of us, right? Each human, each thing, each entity in this world has some masculine and some feminine qualities. And so this asteroid, rooted in feminine pain and turning it into power, this is the secret spicy ingredient that's been in the pantry all along. But if we're not accustomed to working with her, we might not anticipate how powerful or what a helpful, potentially painful, impactful shift it might cause. We can't imagine it until the moment arrives. So, but the betrayed feminine truth gets revolutionary communication power through this conjunction. We're seeing it already, obviously, through the Epstein stuff, right? Sedna is the ingredient that transforms everything when the timing is right. The last time Sedna and Uranus met, for example, was 1931 and 32. Rosa Parks survives an attempted rape in that period. She, of course, as we know later, becomes a force of revolutionary power for justice. This is just one tiny example of a person who has experienced great harm to the feminine, in this case, the feminine body, right? But probably other aspects of her feminine identity, her feminine spirit, right? And I'm not saying this is the only thing that happened to her. Obviously, she's lived a long life, and she lived a long life, and she was responding to many influences, community networks, etc. But this harsh experience that happened to her informed, absolutely, are you kidding me, her wisdom, her feminine wisdom, as she rose and resisted. Okay, so that's Sedna with Mr. Change in one corner. You got Pluto far away in one corner, and you've got Neptune and Saturn in the third corner. There's a lot going on, 5 guys all interacting. Okay, so remember when we learned about the different kinds of triangles in school, depending on the size of the angle, right? Isosceles, right? There were these different kinds of triangles. And so part of our understanding of triangles was to understand what the degrees, the number of degrees that were in each angle. So there's two kinds of angles in this triangle, and different angles in astrology. I know it is hard to believe, but the little compass with the pen in the middle, right? The little triangle shaped tool that you see a lot of, like Copernicus, like you see a lot of like old timey astronomers and astrologers, which were the same thing, by the way, holding that element. The reason is because they're measuring angles, right? They are measuring how far apart things appear to be in the sky within a broader 360-degree circle. Right. So within the configuration that we are talking about, there's two kinds of angles, and they have therefore different meanings. So one angle is called trine. So the trine, which is I'm not going to get into the numbers right now, but a trine is a particular angle, and it creates an unbroken flow of energy. So when astrologers see planets at a trine angle, they know that it is an unbroken flow, that these planets are going to be informing each other in ways that help each other accomplish their thing, right? The other kind of angle in this configuration is called a sextile, which is a different number of degrees angle. But the point of the sextile is to create opportunities. So it's not as like guaranteed flow as the trine is, but a sextile is an opportunity. The reason I'm going into this is because I want you to understand that a significant portion of this insane configuration that we are dealing with right now is made up of sextiles. Sextiles are an opportunity. The benefit is available if we leverage it, if we grab it, if we pull it into what we're trying to do. That's the important thing to remember here. In other words, these angles, these three angles, which are changing and moving as the planets kind of bobble around, but they are staying in this configuration for about 8 years. And they're working hard and intensively in ways that are potentially very productive and very helpful. 3 points on the triangle, full of opportunity and flow. Point 1, rebirth. Point 2, a fight between reality and dreams. And point 3, sudden change to the systems of betrayal. Let's say that again. You got 3 points on the triangle. Point 1 is rebirth, transformation. Point 2 is a fight between reality and dreams. And point 3 is sudden changes to the systems of betrayal and control. Well, that'll do it. Right? With each of these kitchen elements separately, I can predict what would happen, right? Because I may have even worked with the fryer and the processor in a single recipe, but I have certainly never seen what happens when I blend the sourdough starter, the hot oil, the food processor, and this mystery spicy ingredient to my repertoire on the same night. I mean, science can give us some guesses or even some lived experience with the different variables, but we don't really know because no human being in our short history on this planet has ever experienced the combination of these 5 elements in the configuration we have now, putting them all together at the same time. Right, so what makes this moment so profound is that these aren't just any cosmic forces. These are the transpersonal planets, the ones that operate beyond individual ego and personal concern. They're literally rewiring our collective consciousness right now, all at once. Each of us together as a collective are responding to the same frequency on the whole planet, all of us. So when transpersonal planets align like this, they are not just changing our daily lives. They are evolving our spirit. They are evolving our generation. They are evolving an entire civilization at the same time. Now, here's where the cosmic synchronicity becomes a little mind-blowing, and why the events of the past 6 months and the intensification process we are seeing week after week makes perfect astrological sense. So we're going to double-click on the Saturn-Neptune part of this triangle first. Okay, so a Saturn-Neptune conjunction has always been about borders, boundaries, control. And guys, it has always affected, especially the United States, China, Russia, and Israel. So we can count on this configuration affecting these foreign nations, affecting the ways that they're even interacting with each other, but certainly the ways that they're interacting with their people. Let's look at the pattern. I'm going to go very briefly through the last 7 Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. If you've listened to me before, you've listened to me go into a few of them with more depth, but I'm going to sort of glance over the top of each of them so that we are noticing the larger theme here, okay? This is the hot fat, remember? Dreamy outcomes that can make you unconcerned with your health choices and very specific, dangerous, serious rules of engagement. Okay, 1 of 7. The first Saturn-Neptune conjunction we're going to look at is 1846 through 1848. Things are happening all over the globe. The Communist Manifesto is published. The U.S.-Mexican War ends with a massive redrawing of borders as America annexes California, Texas, Utah, Arizona, Nevada. Ireland's Great Famine leads to infrastructure collapse and a massive emigration. So we're already seeing massive changes to people. We're already seeing borders move, right? 1882. There's a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. In multiple places in the world, political unrest engenders a vacuum of power, inviting unwanted influences. The Chinese Exclusion Act in the US, for example, limits immigration from China. England occupies Egypt following unrest to protect the trading power of the Suez Canal. These 2 moves by imperialist nations are all attempts to control porous Neptune borders with Saturnian structure. You're seeing the theme now, right? The Saturn-Neptune conjunction in 1917. There's a Bolshevik revolution in the Russian Empire, right? So you've got the erosion and the collapse of a dysfunctional empire, engendering an idealistic vision of an egalitarian, right, the end of feudalism. So a vision of an egalitarian, socially responsible government. The entire concept of what Russia actually meant was up for grabs at that time. Same period of time, Britain issues the Balfour Declaration promising Jews a national home in the middle of an existing country, Palestine. Boundaries between civilian and military authority blurred dangerously at multiple spots on the globe. One theme is emerging, of course, is that the conflict between humanity and weaponry is coming head to head. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction in 1952 and 1953, you've got Stalin dying after a reign of terror that lasted for the full cycle of these 2 planets, by the way, and their dance. There's major border skirmishes between Israel and Palestine. The Korean War ends and cements the decision between North and South Korea, borders literally being drawn through conflict all over the world, right through neighborhoods, right through nations all over the world. Borders being redrawn, the men with guns, the people resisting, right? You're seeing these themes. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction in 1989, you see the United States invading Panama. You see the Berlin Wall falling. You see the setting up, but also the breaking down of borders, of walls, of boundaries. Tiananmen Square protests in China occur, a rare defiance to the autocratic Chinese regime. In Israel, there's a serious escalation in the first Palestinian Intifada with protests, attacks, counterattacks, and significant shifts in diplomatic definitions, approaches, and trends. The Soviet Union dissolves. So we see the pattern here, right? Borders move, powers interact, pushback works, power over works, revolutions succeed, and revolutions are put down. But the conflict at the heart of the revolution is the point, right? The guys with guns dominate and the guys with guns recede. There is always violence. There is always a dispute about who's going to run things, about who's allowed inside this border. It is always a heady time for leaders. That's one of the big headlines here in this triangle, y'all. This idea of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and the idea of these borders changing, this dream ending or beginning, and this sort of violent disruption of the way things were, drawing new lines around the way they ought to be. That is one of 3 points. That's the hot fat on the stove. That's only one of 3 points, right? But here's the fun kicker. Let's look for just a moment at the leaders themselves who are leading during this intense clash of humanity, of shadow and light, frankly, right? Let's look at the leaders themselves and how the planets are interacting with them as individuals. Putin is born in 1952. Xi Jinping is born in 1953. Both are born under the exact Saturn-Neptune conjunction of 1952 and 1953. They are literally living out the unconscious shadow forces as we approach this climactic event, this climactic exact conjunction in February of 2026. Putin was born with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction on his sun, on his identity, on who he thinks himself to be. So all of this conflicting, border-challenging power over, resist, respond, redefine, all of that is happening on the man's sun, on how the man understands himself to be. Xi's chart shows similar Saturn-Neptune influences with the 2 planets together, trining his sun, creating, again, that unbroken flow of energy, right? So it's not on top of his sun, but it is generously influencing and supporting his identity. So both leaders are manifesting what happens when these transpersonal forces operate without conscious spiritual wisdom behind them. They are expressions of unconscious cosmic patterns, and their behavior throughout their lives reveals this shadow side. We can see it. It reveals these placements as they enact some of the most constrictive policies on the entire planet at this time, controlling their people with misinformation, with dreams, with illusions, with power. Netanyahu and Trump, on the other hand, are born in 46 and 49, respectively. They represent a different but related activation. Their birth charts are interacting with another point on this potent grand pyramid, this potent great pyramid that we're seeing, Pluto. He's the guy way off in the corner with the sourdough starter, right? So Pluto is that bubbling, brewing, transforming, stewing, taking trauma and turning it into consciousness, power, right? And both of these guys are experiencing Pluto's opposition to their natal opposition right now, right? So they were both born with Pluto in roughly the same spot, and we're halfway through that 248-year cycle that Pluto takes to move around the planet. And so in the time that they've been alive, Pluto is opposite where it was when they were born. That explains why their use of power is being so intensely challenged and exposed right now through charges of fascism, through charges of genocide, through corruption trials that both of them have endured, right? Through their crimes revealed, through cruelty as a signature, right? So much of Pluto's force on our personalities is about what we do with horror, what we do with pain, what we do with the stuff deep inside of us. And cruelty is certainly a signature distraction to the flawed men themselves. So when Trump orders nuclear submarines repositioned after Medyev's threats and trolling, or he fires the person in charge of his economic numbers, or Netanyahu gaslights the world saying, "You cannot trust your lying eyes. What they're seeing isn't real," or Russia acquires a state-owned messaging system in a step that will likely shut down his country's ability to speak to each other without anyone knowing what they're saying, continues. And while he continues to torture and kill hundreds of Ukrainians each day, when China seizes passports from elementary teachers and violently oppresses the religious minorities within its borders, these are not just policy decisions. These are unconscious expressions of the Saturn-Neptune pattern playing out through leaders who were literally born under key aspects of these forces in our contemporary sky. The reason so many supervillain types are running everything right now is not just a coincidence. It's what happens when these transpersonal forces activate leadership without consciousness. So we've got the nuclear escalation. We've got the information war and the misinformation war. We've got the violent suppression of outsiders or dissidents. And we've got the obsession for each of these leaders with power, with their own power over, with their own longevity. All of this is happening as we are in this birth canal of the Great Pyramids, peak intensity. So the Saturn-Neptune conjunction becomes exact at 0 degrees Aries on February 20th, 2026. But here's a critical piece. What happens after February 26th is being determined by what we do now, right? So I keep telling you that this configuration is going to begin to dissipate before the next American election. That doesn't mean the thing is resolved by that. What that means is something has, the action has peaked, right? The climax in the novel has peaked. We don't yet know what happens at the climax, but the climax absolutely determines, as you may remember, the denouement, the what is it calling, the falling action, right? The action that comes after that climax. The climax is the big event, the big fateful determining factor in the novel, right? Like all the rising action is leading to it, and then eventually it occurs, and then what happens after is a result of it. The climax in our novel is in February of 26. It hasn't happened yet. But after the falling action, the denouement that comes after it between 26 and the theoretical next American election is determined by what happens between now and February 26. So we are not passive recipients of these forces. We are active participants in how they manifest. The storm has arrived. What will you do in the rain? It is staying. The storm is staying. It is one of those paralyzed storms that just stays overhead and drowns the surface of the earth, right? Like we are in that now. That is why it feels so intense. That's why no one you know is okay. The forces have officially gathered, right? So where does this leave us? What's our role in this once in human history configuration of transpersonal forces? Well, first we've got to appreciate the magnitude of the thing, right? Understand how big it is, how rare it is, how it has literally never occurred before. So these 3 points in this triangle have never all interacted at the same time in the same way. That's not just about like your personality preferences or who you should date or, when you're going to next get paid or get laid. These are transpersonal planets working on the mood, the behavior, the dreams, the information, the boundaries of the entire collective all at once. So the breakdown we're experiencing is not personal. It is not your personal failing. If your world is falling apart right now, it is part of the project. It is part of the process. It is transpersonal. I'm only realizing like 3/4 of the way into this conversation that the use of the word trans is going to like excite some people who probably wouldn't like the podcast anyway. But your individual chart is also being activated by these forces that are simultaneously transforming the entire generation and the civilization, of course, right? So you are living through this rare transformation in human history, and it is happening at levels deeper than your conscious mind can fully grasp. But every single chart that I look at, this Great Pyramid is on it, right? The transits are happening to your chart too. And so some part of your life is being rattled, is being moved, is being undone or redone. A new dream has arrived, right? A new challenge has arrived. Something from the depths has surfaced, right? This is happening to all of us, and it's for something, right? The collective rattling is for something. So we have got to understand the choice point at which we find ourselves. This whole thing can go either way. I cannot stress that point enough. Each member of the configuration has helpful aspects available to all of humanity. And each point in the triangle has harmful aspects. So the Great Pyramid, the Great Triangle, I like to think of it again as a pyramid because it's like this giant object in the sky, is creating a flowing support for transformation. But the question is, will it be conscious transformation or unconscious transformation? Will it be transformation in the light or will it be transformation in the shadow? The planets are asking for us to rise to the moment. Let's look at the choices we have for each of these points in the triangle. Okay, so for the Saturn-Neptune point, you've got a shadow option, which is authoritarian information control, false border narratives, nuclear posturing even, right? And then the conscious expression, the expression in the light, if you will, is fierce truth-telling, spiritual warriors for justice arriving, right? Reality-based compassion occurring. That's one. Way back in the corner, you've got Pluto and Aquarius. That phenomenon alone can manifest in two ways. You've got the shadow expression. You've got tech oligarchs. You've got a surveillance capitalism. You've got an unconscious collective power, right? You've got the people being ruled by innovation, essentially. But the conscious expression, the expression in the light, if you will, the expression in integrity, in alignment with an evolving humanity, is a true collective empowerment. That technology and all of that innovation serving humanity. So a conscious evolution occurring as a collective, and the revolution is for the people, of the people, by the people, right? The original intention of what this nation was supposed to be could theoretically rise through this moment of transformation, of intelligence, of innovation. In the third corner, with the Uranus and Sedna and Gemini combo, you've got, again, two options of the way this can go. The shadow version of that corner, it's propaganda warfare, disinformation, and suppressed truth about harm to the feminine. The conscious expression in the light, if you will, of that corner of this triangle is revolutionary truth-telling, survivors speaking truth to power, a communication revolution, a dramatic shift in consciousness and awareness, and kindness. Is that too much to ask? Is that too much to imagine? That is what's available in the conscious side of that Uranus-Sedna combo. So we have got to collaborate with the forces swirling over our heads. The transpersonal planets do not respond to ego resistance. They are either bigger than your personal will, or even, if you will, if you believe in such things, your own individual magic. Do not try to control this transformation. Do not try to outrun it. Do not try to ignore it, right? Collaborate with it. These forces want to evolve you. They want to evolve you and yours. They want to evolve your nation. They want to evolve your people beyond who we thought we were into what we were meant to become. So the Great Triangle, the Great Pyramid, is calling each of us to level up in whatever areas of our collective life is being activated within our individual journeys. I know you hear something. I know you hear a request. I know you hear rumblings within you of something that is trying to be heard, be acknowledged, be changed, be learned, be found, be done. Heed that call. Heed that call knowing that it is not just about your own life anymore. Heed that call knowing that the decisions you make in your personal life are also, as a result of this configuration, going to be transpersonal. So root in what's real, root in community, root in spirit, root in relationships, root in practice. The external chaos cannot destabilize what is rooted in a transpersonal collective truth. Build the parallel systems while the old ones crumble. You know, the trees talk to each other. The people talk to each other too, right? So respond energetically to what is happening to our entire frequency, and bring others with you. Enhance those connections, enhance those messages, enhance that information that is coming to you through relationship, not through insanity, not through toxic, not through trolling, not through cruelty, but through kindness, through love, through care. If you look at social media, for example, you can see both versions available. You can see real connection, real bonding, real kindness, real community, real reaching out. And you can see horror. You can see meanness. You can see unkindness. You can see exclusion. You can see danger, right? Both of these things are true in this one sort of information hub of ours. But we can use it and, human, regular, old-timey relationships to build the systems that we need to hold ourselves together while these old ones inevitably crumble. The more we inject the truth, the more we inject kindness, the more we inject care, community, concern for each other, the more we express our emotions, the more we take care of each other, put mutual aid into the atmosphere, right? Hey, I'm good at something and you're good at something, and they're pretty different. You want to do them together for each other, right? Want to exchange our skill sets, want to exchange our expertise, want to exchange our passion so I benefit from yours and you benefit from mine. Try it. The more material these cosmic forces have to work with that isn't oppressive or harmful, we will bring ourselves closer to that conscious, enlightened, evolving possibility available in this configuration. And we will move as a collective farther away from the shadow. Remember, the Great Pyramid peaks in 26 and begins to dissipate in 28. This is not the end of the world. It is the birth of a new one. So the overwhelm we're feeling is a signal to us that our consciousness, our choices, our courage matter every minute of every day more than we know. So when we look at the history of the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, we see that there is violence. We see that there is boundary shifting. We see that there is a dream beginning or dying or being leveraged or being misused, right? So we see that the Saturn-Neptune thing that is happening to us, that is peaking in 26, is a big deal. And if that's all that was happening, it would be scarier, I submit, than this is. It's going to happen again in some 40 years, right? But this one, which can be so scary and is so impactful and is the sort of culmination of so many things, is being aided by these other 2 points in the triangle, is being aided by these other forces, right? And those other forces give us hope. So while Saturn and Neptune are creating this crisis, the other 2 points in the triangle are simultaneously bringing breakthrough. So you've got breakdown happening as a result of Saturn Neptune, and you've got this breakthrough offering. It's an offering from the other 2 points. The suffering is never, ever all for nothing, especially when we understand how this first time in history configuration might actually work based on our experience with its component parts. So we have worked with all of these elements before. I know how to make the hot pot of oil work. I know how to make the food processor work. I know how to work with a mystery spice. I know how to make sourdough bread, right? But what happens if all of these things are kind of going off at the same time? That's the interesting part. And that's where our free will can really play a huge part. Look at the concrete examples. We have community ice response squads popping up all over the country. We have mutual aid networks that were formed during COVID, gaining permanence and momentum. We have tenant unions organizing building by building. We have workers forming independent unions outside traditional labor structures. We have local communities creating their own energy grids, their own food systems, their own childcare cooperatives. People are walking away from corporate social media and building decentralized platforms like Blue Sky, and they're growing each day by the millions. Right, so neighborhood defense funds are happening, community fridges are happening, tool libraries are happening. These horizontal collective moves within a community enacted by a single or small group of people are bypassing traditional hierarchies, strengthening those energy sparks between trees, right? Pluto in Aquarius is literally democratizing power, taking it away from individual strong men and distributing it back to the collective. We are seeing it every day in small acts of resistance and small acts of protest. And we can look at our own lives. You tell me what examples you're seeing. Something is beginning to rise within you, within the people. A sense of, well, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do something, right? What's your thing that you're being called to do? With Uranus and Sedna in Gemini, a revolutionary food processor with a secret spicy ingredient is chopping up old information systems and giving voice to previously silenced truths. Every day, survivors are speaking truth to power. Citizen journalists and democratized media platforms and podcasts are outpacing corporate media. Leaked documents are exposing corruptions faster than it can be covered up. The betrayed feminine wisdom that Sedna represents is getting revolutionary communication power through Uranus. You're even seeing the shadow side of this element with now a second lone gunman leading into vigilante justice and targeting a corporate CEO. How the lighthearted version of that happened with the astronomy couple at the Coldplay concert, right? The mood has shifted. Here's the beautiful thing about this triangle. These three forces are in flowing supportive relationship with each other. The authoritarian crackdowns are actually accelerating the exposure of the corrupt power, right? So the Saturn-Neptune force behind the authoritarian crackdowns are actually accelerating the exposure of the Plutonian power corruption, right? While simultaneously amplifying previously suppressed or even distracted voices, the Uranus-Sedna part, right? So these pieces are interacting with each other. Putin and Xi's desperate information controls of their people are revealing the weakness of their systems. They are revealing the fear leaders have about what would happen if the truth were out. Trump and Netanyahu's corruption being exposed under Pluto oppositions, right? So they're both fully exposed now. We can both see their depths. We can see both their truths. We can see both of their shame. It's on full display. They can't hide it anymore. They can fight it. They can move to obfuscate. They can move to distract, but we can see it. It's visible now. Pluto's opposition is feeding directly into the collective awakening as it sits as part of this triangle. The harder any of them clamp down, the more truth erupts, right? Through the other channels in this giant game of whack-a-mole. Or they're like, oh, well, it's a new rule here. Oh, new rule here. Oh, new rule here. But the people, the collective, and even, frankly, the technological innovation keeps making it harder and harder to control. So the upcoming peak in February is not just the culmination of the crisis, it's the moment when the collective power of Pluto and Aquarius and the revolutionary truth-telling of Uranus and Sedna reach their maximum flow in relationship to that reality check, to that Saturn-Neptune moment. So we're building now the parallel systems, the networks of truth, the communities of care, the revelation of secrets, and the rising curiosity about what's true, about what's real. These are not just things falling apart. They are the conscious manifestation of the other two points of the triangle affecting this hard moment. The cosmic weather is bringing more than authoritarianism. Yes, it's bringing it. Of course it's bringing it. You can see it in the patterns throughout history. It always brings it. It's bringing the most powerful configuration on top of it that will lead to, can lead to collective liberation in human history. The cosmic weather is bringing more than authoritarianism. This configuration, this Neptune-Saturnian configuration, will always bring authoritarian themes to light. But at the same time, our version of it is that it is bringing the most powerful configuration for potential collective liberation in human history. When I say that, I know it sounds dramatic, but it's really true. Rebecca Solnit is a scholar of feminism, of Western and urban history, of popular power and social change. She writes about hope during dark times, and she captures exactly what this moment requires of us. She says, hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. Hope is an axe you can break down doors with in an emergency. Hope should shove you out the door because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasures and the grinding down of the poor and the marginal. The Great Pyramid is offering us unprecedented cosmic support for the changes we are brave enough to make. Every historical period of similar transformation where consciousness won out over shadow has required people willing to break down doors, to speak uncomfortable truths, to build new systems while old ones crumble. The history books is full of them. Do you think it was easy when they made the choices they made? Right? Do you think it was no big deal to change the nation, to change history, to change the trajectory of the people? No. Rebecca Solnit's axe of hope is in our hands. The question is, what doors are you being called to break down? Gloria Anzaldúa is a powerful Chicana writer. Remember that Chicana identity is one that celebrates the unique status of being both natively Mexican and natively American. And it summons a consciousness of the fact that the damn border of Mexico moved, and suddenly a huge swath of Mexican citizens became denizens of America overnight. And today we see swarms of masked stormtroopers sweeping these same Chicana neighborhoods, singling out individuals based on race, language, occupation. Even federal judges are noticing that. Anzaldúa points out, quote, "Living in a state of psychic unrest is what makes poets write and artists create. It is like a cactus needle embedded in the flesh. It worries itself deeper and deeper, and I keep aggravating it by poking at it. When it begins to fester, I have to do something to put an end to the aggravation and to figure out why I have it. I get deep down into the place where it's rooted in my skin, and I pluck away at it until I get it out. I become a kind of surgeon trying to cut out the thorn in my flesh." End quote. She is calling for that consciousness in all of us. What are we going to have to do to pluck it out, right? She reminds us, quote, "Nothing happens in the real world unless it is first happening in the images in our heads," end quote. She even invites a new kind of thinking that recalls the Uranus change and Gemini language ideas that the sky is currently presenting to us. She says, quote, "The mestiza," a term she uses to describe her own mixed identity as a woman of multiple traditions and nations. She says, "The mestiza constantly has to shift out of habitual formations, from convergent thinking to analytical reasoning that tends to use rationality to move toward a single goal, a Western mode, to a divergent thinking characterized by movement away from set patterns and goals towards a more whole perspective, one that includes rather than excludes." Going, "The struggle is inner," she says. Quote, "Chicana, indigena, white, Indian, mojada, norteña, single, mother, artist, con zafos," meaning with safety or respect, or without, to the mestiza, because the future depends on the breaking down of paradigms. It depends on the straddling of two or more culture. The borderlands concept Anzaldúa introduces could not be more relevant right now as we lean into and respond to the call towards this movement of the dissolution and the redrawing of all the borders, of all the boundaries, of a new reality, right? We don't need necessarily to remake nation states and where they begin and end, but we do need to reimagine what it means for all of us to live collectively in a way that takes care of humanity, no matter where you were born and no matter what language you speak, no matter what you look like, no matter who your people are. So that's the action for the week, y'all. Answer the call. What is your gut telling you you should be doing? What is your resistance to this rising threat? The practice this week, I think, is simply grounding daily in your own experience of this wise and humanity-altering moment. Wisdom is available to you now that was not available to you 4 years ago. It's just true. How is it getting you? How are you experiencing it? What are you doing with it? The practice is consciousness. The practice is noticing. So try this for 5 minutes each morning. Ask yourself, how is this transformation moving through my life today? What is being dissolved in my life? What is being rebuilt? What is being undone? What is being born? How can I align with the highest potential of these changes? What am I being called to say? What am I being called to think? What am I being called to do with the harm I have experienced and the wisdom that rises out of that harm? Remember, you are not imagining this. And you are not managing the transformation either. You are collaborating with forces much larger than your own individual will. It's happening to everybody. Some of us are experiencing much greater suffering than the other. We've named several communities of people today alone where it is much harder to be alive. in those places as those people than it is possibly to be you if you have the privilege and time to listen to a podcast, right? But it is happening to all of us. All of our individual stories are informed by this larger process that is undoing within and to us. And so the reflection is, what's my role in it? What's my role in the transformation? Look at what your life has been look at where your life has been most disrupted in the last few years. That's probably where you're going to be called to evolve and contribute. The breakdown is pointing towards your breakthrough. These transpersonal forces are activating your soul's assignment for this lifetime. For inspiration today, we have Jewish American poet Allen Ginsberg, writing in the late 50s and early 60s. It's important to note that the 60s was a time when two, at least, well, more than that, but for the point of this conversation, two of the planets in this 5-part configuration were very, very close and interacting very, very powerfully. So Pluto, Mr. Death, Mr. Transformation, and Uranus, Mr. Change, Mr. Chaos, Mr. Revolution, Mr. Evolution, Mr. Let's make some soup out of this boring situation, right? So during that time, Ginsberg is writing about his people. He's the one most famous for his poem Howl, which is the great minds of my generation, all of that. And so in this poem, which is called A Footnote to Hell, sort of a PS, he is celebrating the divinity of literally everything as these changes occur. So he says, Holy New York, Holy San Francisco, Holy Peoria, and Seattle, Holy Paris, Holy Tangiers, Holy Moscow, Holy Istanbul, Holy Time and Eternity, Holy Eternity and Time, Holy the Clocks in Space, Holy the Fourth Dimension, Holy the Fifth International, Holy the Angel in Moloch, Holy the Sea, Holy the Desert, the Railroad, Holy the Locomotive, Holy the Visions, Holy the Hallucinations, Holy the Miracles, Holy the Eyeballs, Holy the Abyss, Holy Forgiveness, Mercy, Charity, Faith, Holy, Hours, Bodies, Suffering, Magnanimity, Holy the Supernatural, Extra, Brilliant, Intelligence, Kindness of the Soul. I read that poem today and I think about what's possible, what is holy in each of us, how all of the suffering, even all of the shadow behavior of these leaders and the countries that they are leading as they oppress and pinch and control their own people. Even that is holy. But what is equally holy is our sight, our dream, our imagining of what our countries might be. The reason Putin shuts down the messaging apps, the reason Trump fires statisticians, the reason Netanyahu says, ignore what you see, there is no famine, the reason Xi further squishes dissent among school teachers, fucking nurses, is that they are so desperately trying to control the information because they fear the holiness of our truth, of our songs, of our communication, of our consciousness, of our openness, of our knowing, our organizing, and our refusal to accept their version of reality. The lessons we can take from these great thinkers, the poets, the writers, the seers that have come before us, that even in the darkest moments, there are forces more powerful than tyranny. The tyrants can move nuclear submarines. They can fire truth tellers. They can cage people and call it policy. Hey, they can even call it legal if they want to, but they cannot stop the songs. They cannot stop the truth. They cannot stop the poems. They cannot stop the resistance. They cannot stop the sourdough from bubbling, the food processor from chopping up their lies, the secret ingredient from transforming the pain they are creating into power. We are the life force now, y'all. If this thing is going to evolve towards a place of consciousness in the next 2 years, it is going to do so because of the things you and I and the people we share the planet with do, with our own minds and our own bodies and our own 2 hands. If you would like to understand how these patterns are affecting you personally, I offer readings and coaching that help you navigate your unique relationship with this once in human history moment. What is it calling you to do? How is it undoing your life? How is it reshaping your life? What part of your life is it reshaping? And what is the promise written in that undoing? What is the promise written in that challenge, in that struggle that you are so nobly surviving? Please do me the hugest favor and write a review. If you haven't done so and you're listening, it would be extremely helpful to me and to the project as a whole if you could just write down why you like it, why you stayed this long, why you listened this much. It'll help grow the idea, grow the project, grow the thing. It'll help spread the word. Share it with somebody you love. Remember, the Great Pyramid creates the weather, but we decide what and how to cause inside this storm. The cosmic forces are offering us the rarest gift, the chance to consciously participate in collective transformation and in the formation out of something new. When this trial, when this initiation, when this suffering is over, what song will you sing? What door will you break down? What piece of the new world will you build? Until next time, be well, be conscious, and be kind. I will see you soon.